Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Karli Richards. It's very nice to be back in Athens. I was here last year and talked a little bit about injury prevention for female football players. I'm going to do that again today. And there's a lot of new information that's come about in the last year that I'm excited to share with everyone. So let's get going. This is a little bit about myself. I went to the University of Notre Dame for college, and then I went to Temple Podiatric Medical School for my medical training. I also have my master's in healthcare administration, and I'm board certified foot surgeon and wound care specialist. I've been in a sports medicine practice for over 16 years, and most recently I am a podiatric medical advisor for U.S. Soccer. So I help to write educational content for U.S. Soccer. I am also a former athlete. I played football growing up. I played with boys initially, all boys, and then played girls' high school soccer/football, and was also a springboard diver. I went on to be a Division I springboard diver in college. I have 3 lovely children who all play football or soccer, as we call it in the States. And I am also married to a soccer player. So we have a lot of soccer in our family, which makes me very passionate about what I do. So I have a lot of people ask me, why do I talk about injury prevention, and why did I pick women's football? What drove me into that specific field? And it goes back to a story with my younger sister, who's 11 years younger than me. She played both high school and collegiate soccer. And when I was starting my medical practice, she was a senior in high school and ended up tearing her ACL during one of her games. A year later, went on to tear a second ACL in college and also suffered a traumatic brain bleed, all on the soccer pitch. Because of those injuries, I became very passionate about why this was happening to women, and at the same time, 5 athletes on her team also had ACL tears. So it became very personal to me to find a reason as to why this was happening, and this was a while ago in 2008 when I really started to dive into the subject. So that's my story and why I'm so passionate about it. By the way, my sister's fine. She's also a doctor now and recovered very well from all of her injuries. This is a quick video of another reason as to why I got into international speaking. Just give me 1 second before you play it, Ed. Yeah. So I am also the USA ambassador for an organization called Spirit of Football. It's an organization that sends a football around the world a year before the World Cup. And it represents a sustainability goal. And before the Women's 2023 World Cup, we were really passionate about gender equality in female football. So my family was lucky enough to travel with a ball around the world and have all types of players and athletes and fans and politicians sign the ball to pledge for gender equality for women's football. And through those interactions, I also gave me a speaking platform on injury prevention. So that's another thing that really got me into why I'm here today. So you can go ahead and play that video.
This is our time, this is our game. One ball, one world!
We've been fighting for gender equality now probably our whole careers. Yeah. We'll keep fighting for it, and women deserve to belong in the game just as much. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I pledge to play for gender equality. One ball, one world.
So those are some of the cool experiences that we got to have. My colleague, Andrew Aris, was unable to be here today, but he is the founder of Spirit of Football, and I'm going to show a quick video about what they do real quick so you can understand their mission behind sending this amazing football around the world. So you can go ahead and play that video.
Welcome, everybody! One ball! One world!
One ball, one world.
My pledge is to sign up for renewable energy for my home.
Sustainability is not just about solar panels, water collection, bio-waste food digesters, but it's about education.
I pledge to play for gender equality.
I pledge to empower women to play soccer and to end violence against women.
We're going to reduce our electricity use to help save the planet.
My pledge is to make sure we all learn how to take care of the nest and look after each other just a little bit better.
We all need to make our little contribution, preserving the one Earth we have.
We're just about to get the 10,000 signature.
One ball.
One world.
Dunia moja. Kura wahida. Join our team and make a difference.
Okay, so, and this is what the ball looked like before it was signed by tens of thousands of people. It has sustainability goals on it, and it's very dear to my heart. So we're going to leave this with the Athens Women's Football Summit as their ball from Spirit of Football. So now we're going to get going to talk a little bit about why I'm really here, and that is to educate everyone on injury prevention in the female football player. Some of this is similar to what I talked about last year. Some of it's a little bit different. This slide, it's very evident the difference between men and women in this slide. Green is women, orange is men. You can see that women are 8 times more likely to tear their ACL than men, football players, 2 times more likely to suffer a concussion, and 5 times more likely to suffer an ankle sprain. So the Elite Women's Football Club injury burden. A recent study, which was done by UEFA, tracked 1,527 injuries over 4 seasons from 2018 to 2022. And the study concluded that professional women's football should account for 35 injury losses per season. That's a lot. And ACL has the highest burden on any club. And the reason that is because it takes players out for the longest period of time. The normal time out for a player after an ACL injury is 9 months, and that's conservative. There are some players that are out for 1 to 2 years after an ACL, depending on when they can get their surgery done and how their recovery goes. 72% of the 1,527 injuries were non-contact in nature, meaning it happened some other thing happened that caused the ACL other than a tackle. They weren't hit, the player was on the field doing some move or coming down from a jump, and the ACL injury happened. So 435 ACL injuries have been recorded in the top women's league. 435. Those are the ones we know of. At least 94 players this year alone. And you can see those names. I'm sure you know a lot of those names are players who were out, who are currently out with ACL injuries. So I like to ask this in the room. How many of you know a football player personally who has had an ACL injury? Okay, so that's pretty much everyone in the room. So there's a problem with that, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And hopefully as a community, we can gather enough data to help find solution to this problem. In the 2023 World Cup, 30 athletes missed their World Cup opportunity for their country because of an ACL injury. Katie Rood was one of them. She was at our summit last year. She plays for New Zealand. Mallory Swanson had a patellar injury. Hers was not ACL, but she also had a knee injury. So this is, I just got this information, I think 24 hours ago. In the last 4 weeks, 4 ACL tears have been reported in the WSL. That's 1 ACL tear a week. So for every match day that the WSL had over the last 4 weeks, there's an ACL tear reported. Okay? And when you look at the Men's Premier League, they have reported 10 ACLs in a year. That is a significant difference. And this is an Instagram post that a colleague gave me a few nights ago, which pointed this out. So that's very interesting and also very troubling. Contributing factors of increased injury in the female athletes. So the Journal of Orthopedics cites these things to be contributing factors. One is female anatomy. We are built differently than men. Number 2 is neuromuscular. Our muscles function differently than men. Number 3 is hormones. Obviously, our hormones are different than men. Number 4, shoes and playing surfaces. Shoes can make a huge difference in injury prevention, and the type of surface that you're playing on can also greatly impact your rate of injury. Directional changes on the field, which is a plant and turn injury, which we'll talk about later, and then environmental factors such as workload. So these are all contributing factors to ACL injuries. So this is my anatomy slide. This is a busy slide, but most of you are non-medical in the room, so I like to go over what an ACL is, okay? So here's my knee. The ACL is a ligament that attaches your thigh bone to your shin bone, essentially. It's inside the knee, and it stabilizes the knee joint. When that ligament goes, there goes the patella. When that ligament goes, the knee becomes unstable, and it's very difficult for an athlete to play their sport. It's very important. There's lots of other ligaments and tendons around that ACL. There's a posterior cruciate ligament, the medial and lateral collateral ligaments, the articular cartilage, the meniscus. All of those structures can also get damaged with an ACL injury, and if they do, oftentimes are fixed at the same time. But the ACL is the main one for stability. So you guys are more than welcome to pass this around the room if you want to. Check out the ACL. Okay, so that's just a little bit of anatomy. So another key factor to anatomy with men versus women is obviously we are built differently. So as women, we have wider hips because we bear children, or we are made to bear children. With that wider hip comes a difference in what we call the Q angle. So the Q angle is a line that's drawn from the hip bone to the inside of the knee, and it measures the degree of torsion of your lower extremity. So the Q angle is usually from 12 to 20 degrees. In women, it's usually higher, around 18 degrees, and men, it's usually lower, closer to 12 to 14 degrees. With that increased Q angle causes different biomechanics in the female athlete. It causes the leg to turn in a little bit more, and also can put more strain on the knee ligaments. Another interesting anatomical fact is what we call the femoral notch, and that is a notch on the femur where the ACL attaches. It's a very small area. In women, the femoral notch is usually narrow, so it's smaller than it is in men. So when a woman plants their leg or their foot on the ground and the leg turns, if that notch is smaller, it can actually cause more torque on the ACL ligament. So that's just a difference anatomically. And then finally, our lower extremity alignment is different because of our wider hips. Sometimes women tend to turn in a little bit more. We could have a little bit more pronation, which can put increased tension on the knee ligaments. And our feet are made differently than men. So there's a lot of differences there that can also contribute to the risk of injury. Neuromuscularly, we are also different. Inherently, men's thighs, their hamstrings and quadriceps, are stronger than women. Now, if you take someone and put them both in a weight room, yes, we can get women's hamstrings and quadriceps pretty darn strong, but just generally, men have stronger hamstrings and quadriceps, which causes more stabilization of the knee joint. Women are also what we call quadricep dominant. So that means our quadriceps tend to be stronger than our hamstrings. So that when we land, when we come down from a jump and land, our quads fire more, and it causes the knee to hyperextend. And that, in turn, can put more pressure on the knee joint. So that's another factor that can increase the risk of those non-contact ACL injuries. So hormones. This is one of my most favorite slides because it's not talked about enough. Hormones are very important in female physiology and also in our athletes. And I think as coaches and physiotherapists and doctors and trainers, we need to be talking about this with our athletes routinely and don't make it a taboo subject. because it directly affects performance. So hormones can cause what we call ligamentous laxity at different phases of our menstrual cycle. So that means the ligaments become a little bit looser and the knee is less stable during certain times of the month. There have been studies that shown that. And the late follicular phase of the menstrual cycle is when estrogen is the highest, and there have been studies that show that can increase the risk of ACL injury. So a study done in 2021 tracked international football players for 4 years and showed that there was increased about 88% greater risk to the lower extremity during the late follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. Now, since then, another study was done in 2024, and that study tracked 26 professional soccer players and found that they're more likely to sustain injury in the early mid-luteal phase and also in the premenstrual phase. So it's the studies are really conflicting with all of this, but when you look at the hormones, those two arrows are when the studies show that injuries occur. And if you look at this graph, I'll go through it with you because it's a bit confusing. Phase 1 is from the first to the last day of your period, and that's the big red bubble from days 0 to about 6. Phase 2 is from the end of your period until just before ovulation, and that's days 6 to 14. Phase 3 is from ovulation until your hormones decrease, and that usually lasts 7 to 9 days, and that's days 15 to 23. And phase 4 are the days just before your period, and those are just the few days before your period. So those two red arrows point to late phase 2 and also to mid phase 3, and that is when both studies show that these injuries are occurring. And when you look at both of those areas, that's when estrogen is high, okay? So it's really high in late phase 2, and it starts to creep back up in the middle of phase 3. And there have been studies showing that increased estrogen does, in fact, increase ligamentous laxity. So the data is not there yet on period tracking and hormones, but it's getting there, and it's actually quite interesting. So as a physician, I think we really need to continue to look at this to see if the results are still varying or if they are really pointing to that increased estrogen being a part of the problem. There have also been some studies that show birth control can decrease the rate of injury, but again, not a lot of data is out on that. And the one thing that birth control can do is just control your hormone fluctuation. So that is an interesting note, but I don't condone or discourage birth control. It's just an aside fact, and that's the only study that I could really find on it, and that was published in 2017. So moving on from hormones, we're going to talk about field and what you put on your feet. So in the US, and I know it's not the same in the UK, which is great, but in the US, we play on turf all the time, and it is really not good for our players. Turf can really increase the injury rate for both men and women football players because there's more likelihood for the cleat to get stuck in the turf. The foot does not slide as easily on turf, and that's what we call a plant and turn injury. So if the cleat comes down and the foot stays where it's at and your leg continues to go, there's a really good chance you're going to do something to your knee. So turf is really not great for that. The other thing that's very detrimental to our youth athletes is switching back and forth between turf and grass. So if you have a youth team who practices on grass and then they go and play a tournament on turf, their injury risk is really going to be a lot higher, or vice versa, if they're practicing on turf and then go play on grass. So field playing surface consistency is very important, and I know in football for female athletes, that's hard to come by because of equal access. So I'm really pleading to all the clubs and managers to fight for that for your women. Get them on the good grass fields, try and prevent the turnover between turf and grass, and that should help decrease the rate of lower extremity injury. The other thing that I like to talk about are cleats. And this is something that nobody in the US knows, or kids and parents definitely don't know it. There are different soccer cleats for different surfaces. There is a soccer cleat for an artificial grass field and a soccer cleat for firm ground, and they also have multi-ground cleats for both. So when you go to a shoe store or to a sporting goods store and you buy a soccer cleat, it is really, really important that you look at the bottom of the cleat and know what you are buying. And I conducted an experiment about 2 weeks ago. I went into Dick's Sporting Goods in the United States, and my 11-year-old desperately needed cleats. Her foot's growing, it's crazy, so we went in. And I know a lot about cleats, so I knew what I was looking for. And on the shelf were the men's and the women's cleats mixed together. There were a few that were labeled as women's cleats, but the sales manager couldn't really tell me if they were or not. So I looked at them and I said, well, can you get the box? And I looked at the box, and some of them said women, some of them said men, and they're like, oh, we're not sure. It comes in both sizes. And then I said, well, do you know if they're for firm ground or artificial turf? And oh, we're not sure. So I'm looking, and on the box it's there, but it's very, very small. So you really have to be diligent about looking at the box. You have to know what you're shopping for and make sure you have the appropriate cleat for the appropriate playing surface. And coaches, it's really important that you tell your players, if you're going to play on a turf field, or if you usually play on turf and are going to play on grass, they need to make sure they have the right cleat on. Because if they train on grass all the time and they have firm ground cleats, and then you're playing a game on turf, there's a really high chance they're going to get injured if they're wearing those firm ground cleats, because those cleats are longer and they're going to get stuck in the turf. They're going to grab more. So the foot's going to plant and the leg's going to go and the foot's not going to go anywhere. So cleat selection is extremely important. This slide is from soccer.com. It's a good resource. It kind of lays out the different types of studs you can look for when you're buying a cleat. And it is very confusing, so it's good to educate yourself before you go into the store. Okay, so the female versus the male foot. So obviously, just like we're different from the hips to the ankles, our feet are also different. Surprise, surprise. So women have a wider forefoot than men. We have a higher arch than men. Our heels are different, and we're lighter. And on top of that, we have those wider hips, which make us turn in a little bit more. So, this is a foot model. It's a little foot model. So women our metatarsals these are the metatarsals, which are in the middle of your foot. These are your toes. So women have more distance between their metatarsals. So the tops of our feet are a little bit wider. We also have a little bit of a higher arch often. Okay, everyone's different. Every body's different. There are some women who have very flat feet. This is true. And our heels are a little bit different shaped. So if our feet are so different and our legs are so different, shouldn't we be playing in shoes that are made specifically for us? The answer is yes. And if we can get a shoe that is made specifically for a woman's foot to account for us turning in more and our metatarsals being wider, then that should also help decrease the injury rate on the field. And the other thing is that's interesting, we're inherently lighter than men. So if you take a 120-pound female athlete and put them in the same shoe as a 200-pound male athlete, there's a good chance that shoe is going to be too heavy for the female athlete, and that can also cause problems. So there's so many different factors to the shoe discussion that are very important for women to be aware of. Okay, so these, as I talked about before, causes of ACL tear on the field: sudden stop or decrease in speed, poor landing after a jump, direct collision with a player, or a sharp directional change. That's me, my dad, and my granddad. My dad and my grandfather are both orthopedic surgeons, and my grandfather was actually the first orthopedic surgeon to describe the non-contact ACL tear in the 1970s, and he used to treat American football players, not soccer players. And he would see these big men coming into his office with swollen knees, and they were diagnosed with knee sprains. they'd immobilize them for a few weeks and try and get them back to the field, and these guys were just never getting better. Now, in 1970s, there was no MRI, there was no ultrasound, there was no CT scan, so they had no other way to diagnose ACL tears except for in the operating room. So my grandfather started taking some of these players to the OR and was finding that they had ACL tears. And the interesting thing about these players is none of them were hit. So that's why they didn't want to operate on them. They sprained their knee in practice, they turned wrong, and then their knee hurt. So these were non-contact injuries. And that's when they started to discover, oh, wait, this ligament can be torn without being hit, which was a very interesting finding. So that goes way back to the 1970s. Here we are now talking about how this affects women, and I think that's pretty interesting. So playing environment is a very important factor that impacts female athletes, I think much more than male athletes. Overtraining is also associated with ACL injuries in elite players, and this is a website on FIFPro. It is a work monitoring website. It's really cool. You should definitely check it out. Go on FIFPro, and you can actually, as a player, put in your information and just log your practice hours, log your games, log where you're going in the world. I played in France on Monday, and then I played in England, on Thursday. And, there's travel time involved. And this app will tell you how much playing time you are averaging versus rest time. And then FIFPro is using this data to see if this is also impacting injury rate. So that's a really cool tool that I think players should be aware of, and definitely check it out. And the website's on the bottom there. And then FIFPro, they have also launched a study with Professional Footballers Association and Nike to assess playing schedules, training facilities, staff, and access to staff members compared to injury rates. So I think that's another great study that's going on right now to see how workload is affecting the rate of injury in our female soccer players. So to sum this up, prevention's key. Strength and conditioning is very important for female athletes. I didn't really touch on that yet. The FIFA 11 Plus program should be done on all levels of play, starting at the youth level. It should be done at least twice a week, and that has been shown to dramatically decrease the rate of ACL tear in any athlete, male or female. And I think the most recent study said it was decreased by 47% if you adhere to the program. Now, if you do it once a month, it's not going to work. But strength and conditioning is very important. Female-specific nutrition programs are a big deal. Obviously, football boots made for female anatomy, educational menstrual cycle, consistent training service, and then less demanding training schedules with workload monitoring. So this is some information on the FIFA 11 Plus program. You really want to work on the hamstrings and the quadriceps to strengthen all the muscles around the knee. Core work is very essential because everything comes from our core. If we don't have a strong core, it's all one chain. It starts at the core and goes down. So that's very important. And then obviously landing techniques. We need to teach our young athletes how to land when they're playing. So it starts when they're young. If you see a young player, 10 or 8-year-old on the field, and they come down after a jump and they're knock-kneed or their legs are straight, we need to correct that when they're young so they can learn to land with the knees bent in a slightly squatted position to decrease stress on the knee. So those are all very important techniques that we need to start at a young age in youth soccer. And then finally, the shoes, what I talked about before. These are some shoes that are made for women athletes. I brought them with me. You can pass them around. One is Ida. I do some work with Ida. They're a phenomenal company. These shoes are made only for women athletes. They don't do any male shoes, and they're made off of a female last, meaning they take a woman's foot mold and make the shoe after that. It has more arch support. It has a wider toe box. The cleats are spaced differently on the bottom, and also the cleats are shorter and more conical so that it allows your foot to slide a little bit when you're on the pitch, so it takes less stress off the knee. Adidas has F50. These are the ones that Trinity Rodman is in. These are made for women and also have a bit of a different cleat pattern. And then these are the Puma Ultra Match 5, I think is what they're called. And you can see these, you can really notice in the Puma shoes, the toe box is a little bit wider when you look at that versus the Adidas shoe. So I think the shoe companies are starting to go in the right direction. I don't have any direct affiliation to any of these companies, so I don't know exactly how Adidas or Puma or Nike are made. I do know how IDA are made, and they are made specifically for women and are science-backed, but I've had some reports that perhaps the Nike Phantom Luna is very similar to the men's version. So I'm not 100% sure that all of these are female-specific yet. And if anyone knows more, I would love to chat with them. That would be great information for me. So, but it is really important for you to do your education and know what type of shoe you're putting on your foot. So now we're going to talk about new innovations. And this is so exciting because a year ago I was here and I gave a lot of the same information, but no one was doing any, there weren't a lot of studies out there. There hadn't been a lot of advancements. And now in the last year since the Women's World Cup, things are starting to happen. And that is so exciting in the field of medicine and also for all of our female footballers out there. So one new innovation is called Move True, and this is an instant data analysis for biomechanics of a player and performance analysis. And this can actually determine the risk of ACL injury through functional testing. And is Naomi here? You want to stand up for a minute? This is Naomi's innovation and app, and it's astonishing. And thank you so much. And if you want to know more about Move True, talk to Naomi, but it's great. So that is one new development that I've learned about since I've been here, which is fantastic. This is another interesting piece of equipment that an athlete can wear. It's called topical gear, and this is a sleeve that you wear on your thigh above your knee, and it applies 25 millimeters of mercury of pressure to your hamstrings and quadriceps to activate the muscles when you're working out. So a lot of players are using this post-operatively. So after you have an ACL repair, they'll wear it because it will help to strengthen the muscles more quickly. But it's also been proven to be used, without surgery, so as a preventative measure. It's hard to get athletes to wear things, but I don't think it would hurt to try. I did meet the owner of this company. He's very excited about this piece of equipment, and I think any type of innovation in the football sphere is good, especially if it helps to reduce injury. So I think this is definitely worth checking out. And this is out of the US. It's called Topical Gear. So finally, we still need more research. It's starting to happen, but it's not there yet. I still can't sit up here and tell you exactly what is causing ACL tears. I can't tell you if it's your shoes or the field or your strength and conditioning or your hormones or your nutrition or your workload. I don't know which one it is. My opinion, it's a combination of everything. I really do believe that. But in order to get to a better conclusion and to make better recommendations to players and coaches and doctors, we need more research. So I really encourage all of you, if you are club owners, if you're players, any association with youth soccer, professional football, to encourage your players to get involved in this research because it will really help them in the future, essentially. And so one of my friends, Catherine Krager, did a study in 2022 and found that there were only 497 peer-reviewed studies in women's football for injury prevention. And when you look at men's, there's thousands and thousands and thousands. So we need more to make better recommendations. So this is something that's happening now. I'm sure you all know who Michelle Kang is. She is starting a performance innovation lab with Don Scott to do just this, to get more data on women's football, to encourage more research, and to make better recommendations for our female athletes. And she's doing this with the Washington Spirit. She also has an app. It's called Kaniska. You can find it in the App Store. It does period tracking, so you can track your period on it. It also has nutrition guidelines, has information on strength and conditioning. So it is, I think it's still they're still working on it. I don't know if it's the final version that they're putting out, but it's very interesting, and I encourage everyone to take a look at that as well. And then the FIFPro study is what I talked about earlier. This is going to evaluate women and their workload and on how that relates to injury and injury prevention. And so I would really encourage you all to go on the workload tool on FIFPro if you're a player and fill that out to see how that might be affecting you, or if you're a coach or a club owner, how that could be affecting your players and how you might change it for the better. Okay, so this is not very easy to see. This is a little thing I came up with. It's called Protect Our Players. It's on your seats. It's on the back of the QR code. It's hard to read because it's in small print, and I do apologize for that. I ordered it at Staples and thought it would be bigger, and I was wrong. So I'm so sorry. But this goes over, in a nutshell, everything I just talked about, and everything that I think our female athletes need to do to help decrease the injury risk. So number one is strength and conditioning. There's a link to FIFA 11 Plus on there. There's the cleat and stud length recommendations, and there's a link to a good recommendation site on how to determine what cleat you should be buying for which surface. Shoe selection, I listed the shoes that I talked about today on here. Consistent playing surfaces, hormone education and nutrition with different websites that will give you more information about that. And then finally, proper time off and rest with the FIFPro monitoring tool. So please, take those cards to your players. It's a good resource for them to help keep them healthy and prevent those lower extremity injuries. Another really cool place to go for information is USA Soccer. They have a website called Recognize to Recover, and so that is on the back of this card. So that's that little QR code. If you scan that, it'll take you to what I wrote for them on foot and ankle injuries. It goes over the type of injury that can occur, what to do if the injury happens, things like that. And they have that for every type of injury. They have one on ACLs, they have one on concussions, muscle strains, things like that. So it's a really good information place for your players just to get general medical advice when an injury might occur. So that's on US Soccer. So finally, we want to, our goal as a community is to make women's soccer better, make it more prevalent, make it safe for our younger generation coming up, and make everything equal. We want equal pay, we want equal playing fields, we want equal gear, our own gear, and we also need equal medical research. So that is, part of all of this. And if we can't get the research, then we can't help the players. So I'm asking all of you to help me get some of this research so that I can make our playing environment safer for our younger generation and give them good recommendations. So this is a survey that I've developed. It's 11 questions. It won't take more than 5 minutes. You can take a picture of that. If you are not a soccer player, please do not take the survey. You can take a picture of it if you're not a soccer player, but please don't take the survey. If you are a retired soccer player, you can take the survey. So qualifications to take the survey: you have to be a woman or a girl, and you have to have played soccer or are currently playing soccer. And if you can help me with this, then I can help all of you with data and better recommendations in the future. And that's essentially my goal. So I'm going to hand the mic over to my good friend Randy Height to talk about what's next and how we can push this data onto an online platform and give our players recommendations on education, injury prevention, strength and conditioning, shoe recommendations, nutrition, hormone tracking, workload monitoring, medical recommendations, and data collection. So we're trying to put all of this together to make it easier for the football community and also easier for the medical community going forward. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. Yeah.